Humans blew the arrogant aliens to bloody bits in a stunning act of rebellion after the alien scum demanded humanity's surrender and enslavement. Spiker, a young Vidian student, rushed through the crowded hallways of the prestigious Galactic Academy. The alien student dodged and weaved past his classmates, desperate to get to Human History 101 on time. He was late. Again. He burst into the lecture hall, heart hammering in his chest. Professor Zorgax, the tall, spindly Arcturan, was already mid-lecture. The hall was unusually packed with students from various alien races, filling every seat. All eyes turned to Spiker as he slunk to his desk. Spiker leaned forward, intrigued. He had always been fascinated by humans, a species that defied expectations. Professor Zorgax pulled up a holographic display of Earth, the human homeworld. In 2247, by the human calendar, the Vidians made first contact with humanity, Zorgax said gravely. The humans were technologically inferior, having only recently achieved interstellar travel. The Vidians, in their arrogance, saw the humans as little more than cheap labor and resources to exploit. The Vidians demanded the humans submit and hand over their planet, Zorgax continued, his voice echoing through the hall. The humans refused, and that's when things took a shocking turn no one, least of all the Vidians, predicted. A turn that would change the course of galactic history forever. Spiker's heart raced. He knew the basic story, everyone did, but he sensed there was far more to what happened. Lives hung in the balance. The truth of what really occurred could shatter the very foundations of their society. Professor Zorgax met Spiker's eyes, his gaze intense and foreboding. Let me tell you the real story of how the primitive humans did the unthinkable and saved themselves from enslavement and annihilation. Professor Zorgax nods sagely as the hushed whispers fade. Indeed, the humans' audacity was unprecedented, but their boldness was not without reason. He taps a button and a holographic image of a chessboard appears, hovering above the lecture hall. On one side sits a tall, thin Vidian with a calculating glint in his eye. Opposite him is a young human male, his face a mask of concentration. The Vidian champion, Zanar Thul, was renowned for his strategic brilliance and undefeated record in interspecies chess tournaments, Zorgax explains. He had studied human chess extensively and was confident in his ability to outmaneuver any Terran opponent. The hologram shifts to show the human Terry Russell making his first move. Spiker watches intently as the game unfolds, each player's holographic avatar moving pieces with swift, decisive motions. But Russell, Zorgax continues, was no ordinary human. A prodigy from a young age, he had honed his skills against the most advanced chess AIs Earth had to offer. His unconventional strategies and ability to think multiple moves ahead caught Thul off guard. Spiker's heart races as he watches the game progress, the tension in the room palpable. Thul's initial confidence begins to waver as Russell's unorthodox moves put him on the defensive. In a stunning display of tactical brilliance, Russell sacrificed his queen, luring Thul into a trap that ultimately led to checkmate, Zorgax says, his voice tinged with awe. The Vidian delegation was stunned. They had underestimated human ingenuity and adaptability. The hologram fades, and Zorgax turns to face the class once more. The humans had won the first challenge, but the contest was far from over. Next, the engineers would face off in a battle of technological prowess and innovation. Spiker leans back in his seat, his mind reeling. He had always known humans were resourceful, but to outsmart a Vidian champion at his own game, it seemed impossible. And yet, as he looks around at the faces of his classmates, he sees a newfound respect and curiosity in their eyes. As Professor Zorgax begins to describe the engineering challenge, Spiker finds himself eager to learn more about the incredible humans who dared to stand up to an empire. Professor Zorgax pauses, letting the weight of his words sink in. Spiker glances around the lecture hall, taking in the expressions of his fellow students. The Arcturans seem intrigued, their long necks craning forward to catch every detail. The Gorgons, usually so stoic, have a glint of admiration in their eyes. Even the normally dismissive Xylons appear begrudgingly impressed. The chess match was just the beginning, Professor Zorgax continues, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. The true test of human ingenuity and determination was yet to come. Speaker finds himself leaning forward, his heart pounding with anticipation. He had always been taught that the Vidians were the most advanced species in the galaxy, their technology and intellect unrivaled. And yet, here was evidence that the humans, a species that had only recently ventured into the stars, had managed to outmaneuver them at their own game. The second challenge, Professor Zorgax says, was a test of engineering prowess. Each side was given a set of parameters and tasked with designing and constructing a functional spacecraft within a limited time frame. The Vidians, confident in their technological superiority, threw all of their resources into the project. They used the most advanced materials and cutting-edge design software, certain that they would easily outclass anything the humans could produce. But once again, Professor Zorgax says, his voice rising with excitement, the humans surprised everyone. Led by Dr. Liza Nakamura, a brilliant aerospace engineer, they took a completely different approach. Rather than trying to match the Vidians in terms of raw technological might, they focused on simplicity, reliability, and efficiency. Using materials that were readily available and easy to work with, they constructed a spacecraft that was elegant in its design and flawless in its execution. Speaker's eyes widen as Professor Zorgax pulls up a holographic display of the human spacecraft. It is smaller than the Vidian ship, with clean lines and an almost organic aesthetic. But what really catches his attention are the performance metrics scrolling alongside the image. The human ship is faster, more maneuverable, and has a longer range than its Vidian counterpart. It is, in every measurable way, the superior vessel. The Vidians were shocked, Professor Zorgax says, shaking his head in wonder. They had thrown everything they had at the challenge, and yet the humans had managed to outperform them with a fraction of the resources. It was a stunning display of creativity, resourcefulness, and sheer engineering brilliance. As the holographic display fades away, Speaker finds himself filled with a newfound respect for the human species. They had proven themselves to be more than just lucky upstarts. They were a force to be reckoned with, a species with the potential to change the course of galactic history. And then, Professor Zorgax says, his voice dropping to a whisper, came the final challenge. The test of diplomacy. The fate of both species hung in the balance, and the outcome would shock the galaxy to its core. Speaker sits back in his seat, his mind reeling with the implications of what he has just learned. The humans had already proven themselves to be masters of strategy and engineering. If they could triumph in the arena of diplomacy as well. Professor Zorgax pauses for a moment, allowing the gravity of the human victory in the engineering challenge to sink in. Speaker, his mind still reeling from the revelation, raises his hand tentatively. Professor, he begins, his voice filled with curiosity, how did the Vidians react to their defeat in the spacecraft design contest? Surely they must have been shocked that a species so new to the galactic stage could outperform them in their area of expertise. Zorgax nods, a knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Indeed, Speaker, the Vidians were stunned, he replies, his voice tinged with amusement. Zorax, their chief engineer, was particularly incensed. He accused the humans of cheating, of using some kind of trickery to gain an unfair advantage. The professor pulls up a holographic recording of Zorax's reaction to the judge's decision. The Vidian engineer's face is contorted with rage and disbelief as he points an accusing finger at Dr. Nakamura and her team. "This is impossible," Zorax shouts, his voice shaking with fury. "No primitive species could have designed a spacecraft so advanced without stealing our technology. I demand an investigation." But Dr. Nakamura, her expression calm and confident, simply shakes her head. "We didn't cheat, Zorax," she says, her voice firm but not unkind. "We simply approached the problem from a different angle. Where you focused on raw power and speed, we prioritized adaptability and efficiency. It's a different philosophy, but one that clearly has merit. As the recording fades away, Zorgax turns back to the class, his expression thoughtful. The Vidians were forced to confront the fact that their way of thinking, their very approach to problem-solving, was not the only valid one, he explains. It was a humbling realization for a species that had long considered itself the most advanced in the galaxy. Spiker nods, his mind racing with the implications of the human victory. If a species so new to the galactic stage could beat the Vidians at their own game, what other surprises might they have in store? But the contest was not over yet, Zorgax continues, his voice growing serious once more. The final challenge, the diplomatic negotiation, would be the ultimate test of the humans' mettle, and the stakes could not have been higher. The professor pulls up a new holographic display, this one showing a group of human and Vidian diplomats seated around a large circular table. The tension in the room is palpable, the expressions on the diplomats' faces a mix of determination and apprehension. The negotiation scenario was a simulated conflict between two neighboring star systems, Zorgax explains, gesturing to the holographic display. The humans and the Vidians were each tasked with representing one of the systems, with the goal of finding a peaceful resolution to the dispute. Speaker leans forward in his seat, his heart pounding with anticipation. He knows that the Vidians are skilled negotiators, their diplomats trained in the art of manipulation and intimidation, but the humans have already proven themselves to be full of surprises. As the holographic diplomats begin to speak, their voices low and urgent, Speaker finds himself wondering once again just how far the humans will go to prove themselves in this final, crucial test. The fate of both species hangs in the balance, and the galaxy holds its breath, waiting to see who will emerge victorious. As the holographic display of the negotiation fades away, Speaker feels a sense of awe wash over him. He turns to his seatmate, a lanky Arcturan named Xyloth, and whispers, "Can you believe it? The humans actually outsmarted the Vidians in all 3 challenges." Xyloth nods, his large bulbous eyes wide with amazement. "I never thought I'd see the day," he replies, his voice a low hum. "The Vidians have always been so arrogant, so sure of their superiority. But these humans, they're something else entirely." "I know," Speaker agrees, leaning in closer to avoid disturbing the other students. "The way Ambassador Martinez handled that negotiation was incredible. He didn't fall for any of Xalax's tricks. He just stayed true to his principles and found a way to make everyone happy." "And did you see the look on Xalax's face when the negotiation ended?" Xyloth asks, a hint of glee in his voice. "He looked like he'd just swallowed a live gorgon." "It just goes to show," Xyloth muses, "that you can't judge a species by their technology or their military might. The humans may be new to the galactic stage, but they've got something special, something that the Vidians, with all their advanced weapons and fancy ships, just don't have." "Integrity," Speaker says, the word feeling weighty and significant on his tongue. "The humans have integrity. They stand up for what they believe in, even when the odds are against them. They find ways to win that don't involve cheating, or bullying, or manipulation." Xyloth nods, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he says, "I used to think that the Vidians were the most powerful force in the galaxy. But now I'm not so sure. The humans may be the ones to watch out for. They may be the ones who change everything." Speaker feels a shiver run down his spine at Xyloth's words. He looks back at the front of the lecture hall, where Professor Zorgax is pulling up another holographic display. The image shows the 3 human champions, Terry Russell, Dr. Liza Nakamura, and Ambassador Javier Martinez. Standing together, their expressions proud and determined. "The Vidian Empire was stunned by the humans' victories," Professor Zorgax says, his voice ringing out across the suddenly silent room. "They had underestimated the Terrans, dismissing them as primitive and weak. But the humans had proven themselves to be anything but. They had shown the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with, a species with the courage, ingenuity, and moral fortitude to stand up to even the most powerful of adversaries." Speaker leans forward in his seat, his heart racing with excitement. He knows that this is just the beginning of the story, that there will be more challenges and obstacles for the humans to face. But for now, he allows himself to bask in the glow of their triumph, to marvel at the incredible feats they have accomplished. He glances at Xyloth, who meets his gaze with a knowing smile. "The future is going to be very interesting," the Arcturan says, his voice barely above a whisper. "Very interesting indeed." Spiker nods, turning his attention back to Professor Zorgax. He can hardly wait to hear what happens next, to learn more about the remarkable species that had dared to challenge an empire and emerged victorious. The human story is far from over, and Spiker knows that he will be hanging on every word, eager to see where their incredible journey will take them next. Professor Zorgax clears his throat, and the holographic display shifts once again. Spiker leans forward, his eyes wide with anticipation. As Professor Zorgax's words hang in the air, a palpable sense of awe and admiration permeates the lecture hall. Spiker, his mind reeling with the implications of the human victory, turns to Xyloth, his eyes wide with wonder. "Can you believe it?" Spiker whispers, his voice trembling with excitement. "The humans didn't just win the challenges, they stood up to the Vidian Empire and won a war against them." Xyloth nods, his own expression a mix of shock and respect. "It's incredible," he agrees, his voice low and reverent. "To think that a species so new to the galactic stage could not only outsmart the Vidians, but also outfight them. It's almost beyond belief." "And the way they did it," Spiker continues, his mind racing with the possibilities. "They didn't just rely on their own strength, but they rallied other species to their cause. They built a coalition of the oppressed and the exploited, and together they took on the most powerful empire in the galaxy." "It's a testament to their character," Xyloth muses, his eyes distant and thoughtful. "The humans could have just defended their own territory and left the rest of the galaxy to fend for themselves. But instead, they chose to fight for something greater, for the freedom and dignity of all species." Spiker nods, a sudden realization dawning on him. "You know," he says slowly, "I think that's what sets the humans apart. It's not just their intelligence or their technology or their military prowess. It's their values, their belief in things like justice, equality, and self-determination. And their willingness to stand up for those values," Xyloth agrees, his voice filled with admiration. "Even when the odds are against them, even when they're facing an enemy that seems unbeatable, the humans never back down from what they believe in." As the two friends sit in silence, contemplating the magnitude of the human victory, Professor Zorgax clears his throat, drawing their attention back to the front of the lecture hall. "The human victory over the Vidian sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy," Zorgax says, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "It was a turning point in galactic history, a moment when the old order was shattered and a new era began." The holographic display behind him shifts, showing images of human diplomats shaking hands with representatives from dozens of different species, signing treaties and forging alliances. In the aftermath of the war, the humans played a key role in reshaping the galactic order, Zorgax explains. They helped to establish a new system of interstellar governance, one based on the principles of equality, cooperation, and mutual respect. Spiker feels a thrill of excitement run through him as he watches the images play out on the screen. He can almost feel the sense of hope and possibility that must have filled the galaxy in those early days after the war, the sense that anything was possible, that a new and better future was within reach. "But the humans didn't just help to build a new political order," Zorgax continues, his voice filled with a quiet reverence. "They also helped to inspire a new way of thinking, a new set of values and ideals that would come to define the post-Vidian era." The screen behind him shifts again, showing images of human artists, musicians, and philosophers, their works and ideas spreading like wildfire across the galaxy. "The humans showed us that true strength comes not from domination or conquest, but from empathy, compassion, and understanding," Zorgax says, his voice filled with emotion. "They taught us that diversity is not a weakness, but a strength, that by embracing our differences and learning from one another, we can become something greater than the sum of our parts. As the lecture comes to an end and the students begin to file out of the hall, Speaker feels a sense of purpose and determination filling his heart. He knows that the human victory over the Vidians was just the beginning, that there is still so much work to be done to build a truly just and equitable galaxy. But he also knows that he is not alone in this fight, that there are countless others like him across the galaxy who have been inspired by the human example and who are ready to take up the cause of freedom and justice. As he steps out into the bright sunlight of the Academy courtyard, Spiker feels a renewed sense of hope and possibility washing over him. The future is uncertain, he knows, but with the humans as their guide and their inspiration, he believes that anything is possible. As Professor Zorgax's words hang in the air, Speaker feels a sense of awe and admiration wash over him. The idea that the humans, who had just emerged victorious from a brutal war with the most powerful empire in the galaxy, would choose the path of peace and reconciliation is almost too incredible to believe. "But, Professor," Spiker asks, his voice filled with curiosity, "how did the humans manage to convince the Vidians to agree to the treaty? Surely, after centuries of aggression and conquest, the Vidians wouldn't just lay down their arms and accept peace." Professor Zorgax nods, a knowing smile on his face. "You're right, Spiker," he says. "The Vidians were deeply suspicious of the humans' motives at first. Many of their leaders believed that the offer of peace was simply a trick, a way for the humans to lull them into a false sense of security before striking the final blow." Xyloth, who has been listening intently to the lecture, chimes in. "I can't imagine the Vidians just agreeing to dismantle their empire like that," he says, shaking his head. They had spent centuries building it up, conquering and enslaving countless species. To just give it all up, it must have been a bitter pill to swallow. Professor Zorgax nods, his expression growing serious. "Indeed it was," he says. "The treaty negotiations were long and difficult, with both sides having to confront the deep-seated animosity and mistrust that had built up over the years. The Vidians were proud and stubborn, and many of them were reluctant to let go of their dreams of galactic domination." Professor Zorgax smiles, a hint of pride in his voice. "It was Ambassador Martinez," he says. "That man had a way with words, a gift for finding common ground, even in the most hostile of situations. He worked tirelessly to build trust between the two species, to show the Vidians that the humans were sincere in their desire for peace." Xyloth nods, a look of admiration on his face. "I've heard stories about Ambassador Martinez," he says. "They say he had a way of making even the most hardened Vidian diplomat feel heard and understood, that he could find the humanity in even the most alien of species." Professor Zorgax chuckles, nodding his head. "That he could," he agrees, "and it was that gift, that ability to see the best in others, that ultimately won the day. The Vidians began to see that the humans were not the weak, primitive species they had once believed them to be. They began to see the strength and compassion that lay at the heart of the human spirit." Speaker feels a sense of hope and inspiration wash over him as he listens to Professor Zorgax's words. He knows that the galaxy is still far from perfect, that there are still many challenges and conflicts to be resolved, but the example set by the humans, their courage, their integrity, and their unwavering commitment to peace and justice, gives him hope for a brighter future. As the holographic display of the treaty signing ceremony fades away, Speaker turns to Xyloth, a determined look on his face. "We have to learn from the humans' example," he says, his voice filled with conviction. "We have to be the ones to carry on their legacy, to build a galaxy where all species can live together in harmony and mutual respect." Xyloth nods, a smile spreading across his face. "You're right, Speaker," he agrees. "It won't be easy, but if the humans could do it, then so can we. We just have to have the courage to try." Professor Zorgax clears his throat, drawing the students' attention back to the front of the lecture hall. "The Human-Vidian Peace Treaty was a turning point in galactic history," he says, his voice filled with conviction. "But it was only the beginning. In the years that followed, the humans would go on to play a vital role in shaping the future of the galaxy, in ways that none of us could have ever imagined. Xyloth's eyes widen in disbelief as Professor Zorgax reveals the humans' groundbreaking discovery. The Vidian variant, he whispers to Speaker. I've never heard of such a thing. And to think it was the cause of their aggression all along. Spiker nods, equally stunned by the revelation. It's incredible, he murmurs back. To think that a single genetic mutation could have such a profound impact on an entire species' behavior. As Professor Zorgax continues his lecture, describing the humans' selfless decision to share their findings with the Vidians and work towards a cure, Spiker feels a swell of admiration for the Terran race. They could have used that knowledge as a weapon, he says to Xyloth. They could have held it over the Vidians' heads or even released it to the public to turn the galaxy against them, but instead they chose to help. Xyloth hums in agreement, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing human and Vidian scientists working side by side in a laboratory. It's a level of compassion that's rare in this universe, he says softly. To look past centuries of conflict and see the Vidians not as enemies but as beings in need of help. It's remarkable. Speaker watches as the display shifts to show Vidian patients receiving the gene therapy, their faces etched with a mix of apprehension and hope. And it worked, he says, his voice filled with wonder. The Vidians changed. They became advocates for peace and unity, just like the humans. Xyloth nods, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It's a powerful lesson, he says, that even the most deeply ingrained behaviors can be overcome with the right help and support, that we all have the capacity for change, no matter how far gone we may seem. As the lecture draws to a close, Spiker sits back in his seat, his mind reeling with the implications of the humans' actions. He thinks of the countless lives that have been saved, the conflicts that have been averted, all because of the Terrans' unwavering commitment to helping others. They really are something special, aren't they? He says to Xyloth, his voice filled with awe. The humans, I mean, they've shown us what it means to be truly great. Xyloth nods, his eyes shining with a newfound respect for the species that had once been dismissed as primitive and weak. They have, he agrees, and I have a feeling that their story is far from over, that they'll continue to surprise and inspire us for generations to come. Speaker can only nod in agreement, his heart swelling with a sense of hope and possibility. He knows that the road ahead will not be easy, that there will be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But with the humans as their guide and their inspiration, he feels certain that anything is possible. Professor Zorgax clears his throat, drawing the students' attention back to the front of the lecture hall. The Vidians' transformation was just the beginning, he says, his voice filled with excitement. In the years that followed, the humans' influence would spread far beyond their own system, touching the lives of countless species across the galaxy. Spiker leans forward in his seat, his heart pounding with anticipation. He can hardly wait to hear what the humans will do next, to learn more about the incredible species that had already changed the course of galactic history. As the holographic display flickers to life once more, showing a map of the galaxy with the human homeworld at its center, Speaker feels a thrill of excitement run through him. He knows that he is witnessing something truly special, a moment that will be remembered for generations to come. The humans' next great endeavor, Professor Zorgax says, his voice ringing out across the suddenly silent room, would take them to the very edges of known space, to a region that had long been shrouded in mystery and danger. Speaker leans back in his seat, marveling at the sheer scale of the humans' achievement. I can hardly believe it, he says to Xyloth, shaking his head in wonder. A transportation network that connects the entire galaxy. It's like something out of a science fiction novel. Xyloth nods, his eyes wide with amazement. And to think it was the humans who made it happen, he says, a species that just a few decades ago was barely capable of traveling between their own planets. Professor Zorgax clears his throat, drawing the students' attention back to the front of the lecture hall. The galactic hyperloop is indeed a marvel of engineering, he says, but it is also a testament to the humans' unique approach to problem-solving. The professor pulls up another holographic display, this one showing a group of human engineers huddled around a table, poring over blueprints and schematics. When the humans first proposed the idea of the Hyperloop to the Galactic Council, Zorgax explains, many of the other species were skeptical. They believed that the technology was too complex, too expensive, and too risky to implement on such a massive scale. But the humans, Zorgax goes on to say, were undeterred by the skepticism and resistance they faced. They knew that the Hyperloop had the potential to change the galaxy for the better, he says, and they were determined to see it through no matter the obstacles in their way. The human engineers worked tirelessly to refine and perfect the technology, collaborating with experts from across the galaxy to address the myriad challenges and complications that arose. They were relentless in their pursuit of excellence, Zorgax says, a note of admiration in his voice. They refused to settle for anything less than the best, and their dedication and perseverance paid off in the end. As the holographic display shows the human engineers shaking hands and embracing each other, their faces beaming with pride and satisfaction, Spiker feels a swell of emotion rising in his chest. "It's incredible," he says softly, "to think of the impact that the Hyperloop has had on the galaxy, how it has brought us all closer together and opened up new possibilities for exploration and discovery." Xyloth nods, a thoughtful expression on his face. "And to think," he says, "that none of it would have been possible without the humans, without their vision, their determination, and their unwavering commitment to making the galaxy a better place." Professor Zorgax smiles, his eyes twinkling with pride and admiration. "Indeed," he says, "the humans have shown us all what is possible when we work together, when we refuse to be limited by our differences, and when we strive to create something greater than ourselves." As the lecture comes to an end and the students begin to file out of the hall, Spiker lingers for a moment, his mind racing with the implications of all that he has learned. He thinks of the galactic Hyperloop, of the incredible feat of engineering and collaboration that it represents, and he thinks of the humans, of the remarkable species that had made it all possible. "They truly are something special," he murmurs to himself, a sense of awe and wonder filling his heart, "something unique in all the galaxy." And as he steps out into the bright sunlight of the Academy courtyard, Spiker feels a renewed sense of purpose and determination washing over him. He knows that he has much to learn from the humans, much to aspire to in his own life and work. But he also knows that with their example to guide him, he is capable of achieving great things, of making his own mark on the galaxy and leaving it a better place than he found it. As Spiker walks out of the lecture hall, his mind reeling from Professor Zorgax's sobering words, he spots Xyloth waiting for him in the corridor. The Arcturan's usually cheerful expression is clouded with concern. "Hey, Spiker," Xyloth says, falling into step beside his friend. "That was some heavy stuff, wasn't it? I had no idea the humans' impact on the galaxy was so complicated." Spiker nods, his brow furrowed in thought. "I know what you mean," he says. "I always thought of the humans as these unequivocal heroes, you know, the ones who saved the galaxy from the Vidians and brought peace and prosperity to all. But now it seems like their legacy is a lot more mixed," Xyloth finishes, his voice somber. "I mean, don't get me wrong, I still think they did a lot of good. The galactic Hyperloop, the Vidian gene therapy, those were incredible achievements. But the stuff about the Zephyrians and the abandoned colonies, it makes you wonder." Xyloth nods, his expression thoughtful. "And now they're struggling to maintain their own empire," he says, "stretching themselves too thin, abandoning colonies. It's not the glorious future we all imagined, is it?" "No, it's not," Spiker says, a sense of unease settling in the pit of his stomach. "And with the humans withdrawing from the galactic stage, who knows what kind of power vacuum that will create? Who will step in to fill the void?" The two friends walk in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Xyloth speaks up, his voice hesitant. "Do you think Do you think we have a role to play in all of this? He asks. I mean, Professor Zorgak said that the story of the galaxy is still being written, and that each of us has a part to play in shaping its future. But what does that mean exactly? Speaker takes a deep breath, his mind racing with possibilities. I don't know, he admits, but I think it means that we can't just sit back and watch from the sidelines. We have to be active participants in the story, you know? We have to make choices and take actions that will help create the kind of future we want to see. Xyloth nods, a determined glint in his eye. You're right, he says. We can't just leave it up to chance or to the actions of other species. We have to take responsibility for the galaxy we inherit and do our best to make it a better place. As the two friends step out into the bright sunlight of the Academy courtyard, Speaker feels a renewed sense of purpose coursing through him. He knows that the road ahead will be difficult, and that the legacy of the humans will continue to cast a long shadow over the galaxy. But he also knows that he and his generation have the power to shape that legacy, to build upon the triumphs and learn from the tragedies of the past. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.